bulk of our society, American society, does not have the ability to think. If you put them in fear, they're going to follow. The classical education gives you logic and reason. A superpower, my superpower actually is that I'm able to absorb information. I listen to probably 75 podcasts right now, but I listen to them at 3 times speed.
A good definition or a function of a civil society is transition the knowledge, the cultures and the traditions from the elders to the young ones.
Our schools of education have really lost their way. The public school systems have really degraded.
What does being an American mean to you?
Being American means that you really stand and abide by the Constitution. There is absolutely cost to freedom.
Before we get started, please subscribe so that you never miss an episode of our cutting-edge contemporary conversations. Thank you.
Welcome, JJ. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you.
JJ, thanks for sitting with us and having this conversation. There's so many things I could talk to you, but before we go into these deep topics, I would love for you to share your story and then your values and what you believe in.
Okay, so my story, like my personal story.
Yes, please.
I grew up in Colorado, and as I got older, I developed a relationship with God, and that led me to the different phases of my life. So I went to college, enjoyed that. I was in political science. I enjoyed that. I started in engineering and decided to switch gears. I went into psychology because I found interest in that, but I didn't know that you really can't get a job with a bachelor's degree in psychology, and there really aren't a lot of jobs for political science degrees either. So I shift gears, and I really felt like God was leading me to go to Houston. So after I got my 2 bachelor's degrees as an undergraduate, I went to Houston. I knew I was going there to meet my wife. And that was part of what I felt the Lord was leading me and teaching me about, that I was supposed to go there. So I went there, didn't have a relative in the state, didn't know what all I was going to do. I knew the church I was going to go to, but I didn't know kind of what all I was going to do. But throughout this time, as I'm going there, I get a scholarship to go to graduate school, and I'm able to get in-state tuition, and I go through my education. So I have been a lifelong learner. And so I have 4 master's degrees from University of Houston, Clear Lake, in psychology. So I was a psychology professor when I was younger, and I enjoyed that. Never really felt at home in anything. I then got an MBA, and I got a concentration in management of technology because I've always been interested in technological innovation and how that impacts society. And then I got a master's in studies of the future, which is a really unique degree. It's a terminal degree, and that was the only program in the United States at the time that was explicitly future studies. So it was the place that I felt most at home intellectually because you had to know and understand almost every field of study, whether it's law, politics, economics, sociology, technology. You had to understand demographics and how that changes over time. You had to understand the history of innovation and how things change over time. So that is where I probably felt the most comfortable because you kind of had to know everything or get comfortable with everything. So that kind of formed my worldview. I've always had an interest in learning things, learning information. Now, as a Christian, that's reflected in the fact that just like the early natural philosophers or the early scientists, if you will, they were essentially describing themselves as in searching after how God made the universe or how God did everything. So that really formed my destiny and my worldview and how I love to learn things. So it's part of how God's equipped me is that I love to learn. So that's just part of my learning journey. But I've spent my time as an adult learning kind of all the information I can from different sources. If I had a superpower, my superpower actually is that I'm able to absorb information at a rate that's in the 99th percentile, where I listen to most of the audiobooks and the podcasts, and I listen to probably 75 podcasts right now, but I listen to them at 3 times speed. And I didn't realize I had that ability until about 20 years ago when the technology allowed me to do that. So I have been, like I said, an information gatherer. So I feel like that's kind of my superpower, my super ability.
Is to absorb like a
Absorb
sponge.
information. Yeah, and I love to teach. That's the other side of it. It's like I feel like you're like a dead sea if you're just receiving information but you're not giving any out. So my gifting is really in teaching. So I teach young people. I have a ministry school where I teach people Christian values and Christian topics as well. So I've done that as kind of a natural outflow. And if I don't have some outlet, I kind of go crazy. So
can I?
Yeah.
I think a very strong background and understanding. I want to pick up the theme of learning and then receiving and giving. And if you want to expand on that, the idea of receiving and then giving, to lead, you have to follow first. To be a good leader, you have to be a good follower. You can't lead without being a good follower. So if you can expand on that thought of receiving, giving, and then following first to lead afterwards, and use some stories from your life, and then your journey as a teacher, and more.
Okay. So
a giver.
Yeah, that actually gives me to one of the, when I do job applications or when I'm thinking of organizations, they ask you like, well, what kind of organization do you like to be in? And one of the things that I realize is like there's a quote from Patton, General Patton from World War II, and his famous quote was, "Lead me, follow me, or get the blank out of my way." And I realize that's my philosophy as well, because I can very readily take the follow from someone rather than taking the lead if they're a good leader, if they're going somewhere, and if I can believe in their vision. So I can easily take the follow and learn from them and guide from them and help them. But on the other side, it's like if there's nobody doing that, I get really frustrated. So when I'm in organizations and I'm in those things, it's like I'll take the lead. I will if it's available. But it all comes down to when you're learning and you're growing, if you don't have a humbleness of spirit that you can learn from other people, you really have topped yourself out. So as a follower, I will seek people who are experts in their field in what they're doing in order to learn from them. So like the training that I've been in this week, it's like I'm going to people that have done a very specific thing and that they've been successful at it, or not always successful, but they've learned from what they've done. So rather than me making all those mistakes on my own, I'm following them to learn from them so that I can apply it in my life and also hopefully pass that on to someone else. Because part of the obligation, even in Jewish history, the whole concept of if you're going to learn something, you're learning it because it's your obligation, whatever you've learned, to pass on to the next generation or to other people.
Leading from there, a good definition or a function of a civil society is to transition the knowledge, the cultures and the traditions from the elders to the young ones, to the youth of the society. And what do you see is that how's the transition happening of knowledge, the cultures and traditions in your society, and what do you see if that's not happening? What's the impact in long term?
Well, we've had a drastic impact in the last 50 years. We've had a change in the education system in how we transmit information. Our schools of education have really lost their way because they're always trying to find the novel or the new. They're trying to find a new way to do something. We have methodologies that work, but they abandon them. They abandon them so that they could write a PhD thesis and say, I found this new thing. But they never tested it to see if it actually worked. But what we see in this country right now is that the public school systems have really degraded and degraded down to being ineffective at almost everything they're supposed to do. But at the same time, we've got a counterculture of homeschoolers that have gone back to the trivium, which is really looking at the three main aspects of it. It's like memorization, there's logic, and there's rationalization. So they're learning the three different fundamental things in how to learn. So depending on their stage of development, they're going through it. But we've seen this resurgence of classical education that is really transforming our society. So some of the most advanced and the best educated and the best students, if you will, the learners, have really had to go into the homeschool world because they couldn't find that in the public school systems.
Wow.
And so that freedom is given us the ability to go to the things that actually do work. And we've seen this subset of a population that's actually excelled the public school world in a great way.
And what has that impacted 50 years of changing of the transition and transfer of knowledge and the fight to go for the novel, what has impacted in terms of the moral culture, the moral values of the society?
It has actually really changed. There is a dynamic. There's a group of people that have the ability to think and analyze. And the classical model, one of the fundamental structures is that you learn language. You usually learn Latin, which for Western civilization, Latin is one of the foundational structures. And the way they have built the language helps you to understand other languages and also how to think, how to form an argument and the logical steps to test that argument and then to determine if if the premises are true, that the result or conclusion is true. And if you don't have that, which is the bulk of our society, American society does not have the ability to think, what are the actual consequences of these premises? Where do they lead and where does it go? And if you've taken that away, you have a society that just emotes, meaning they just move on emotion. And so if you can sway their emotions, it doesn't matter whether there's a logical reason behind it. If you put them in fear, they're going to follow. But in counter to that, the classical education gives you logic and reason for you to be able to take that and analyze something and say, this doesn't make sense. Why would I follow this? With these premise, this conclusion does not follow. It's a red herring, or it's in some way it doesn't actually follow, and they're able to think. So we have a subset of our population. So we've got really two different things going on. We've got a mass or majority of people that really don't understand how to think or how to think logically, and then we have a subset that actually understand logic, but they don't go along with the general public or with the general rules.
So the two angles I wanted to go from there is, how has that impacted because US has been called the superpower from a point of view economics, is the financial hub of the world where the money flows, or from where the money flows out and inwards both. How is that, and also as you said, the larger population, the education is not that, they're not been trained to think and then put the logic around. So how will that impact the workforce? Because for large economic superpower, you need to have good workforce supporting that architecture, and to be sustaining that position, that title in the global economics, you have to have that workforce supporting you.
Yeah, and this is actually the greatest fear right now, that anybody that's a rational thinker that has understanding and has the ability to understand. America is built on a house of cards. Since 1973, when we got off the gold standard, and we've moved to a fiat currency that has no real value in it. And we've at the same time, so our money does not have anything of value between it, other than the Bretton Woods Agreement, that we all agree that America was going to be the reserve currency, and we promised at the time that we were not going to get off the gold standard. We now have really a house of cards. And at the same time, the Americans, other than the fact that we have an entire moral system that's really been cut off from its roots of Christianity, we've got a moral system that's really bankrupt. And it's a very scary time. One of my mentors is Peter J. Daniels, and he was from the World Center for Entrepreneurism, and he's an Australian. And he spent his entire life, after he made his billions of dollars, coming to the United States, trying to encourage Americans to go back to their roots, to realize that the rest of the world is looking to them. And when we do these things, like build our debt into the trillions, $30 trillion, $34 trillion, that there's no way. We're scaring the rest of the world because we're out of control. We don't have an economic system that's actually stable right now. It is as if we're using a Jedi mind trick. All the money's just fine. You have a population that can actually do jobs. We don't. It's a house of cards, and it's scary. And I know the rest of the world, if they're looking at this, are terrified. And honestly, they should be.
And from the house of cards, the next word which pops in my mind is the American dream. Define the American dream as on today, and tell me more about how many Americans could access that American dream.
The American dream has traditionally been to be able to have a job and economic stability enough to own your own property, to have your own piece of the pie, their own piece of the world. So it would be that you owned your house and you owned the property. You might have had a mortgage on it, but you could pay your bills and you could survive with that. That's kind of the classical definition, at least economically, what the American dream is. We are at a stage right now because of the fact that we've been mismanaging our funds and the interest rates have gone up so high. It's a confluence of things, but the economy and what we did with COVID and the fact that our supply chains got messed up, we've really gotten the housing costs for a huge portion of the country. Now, there's some areas where the housing costs are not as expensive, but for the most of the country, housing costs are beyond the means of the average person. So the average two-parent couple with two kids cannot afford to purchase a mortgage or to buy a house with a mortgage right now. And it's because the interest rates have gone so high. Now, they're really historically at the norm, because our historical norm for interest rates is 7%. And that's pretty close to where we are now. But we spent the last 20 years at an artificial low because of the way the economy was working, that now it's become, with the inflation, the cost of a new house is out of the reach and out of touch, and out of the possibility realm for the average American family.
Wow.
So it is scary. And so if we don't have a shift or a change in that, where we stop having this radical inflation and we start using the assets that we have, because really the only way our country creates wealth is using our resources. We either innovate it or we use the resources we have to produce or create something.
Can you talk more also on the national identity of being an American? What does being an American mean to you? And then how many of your fellow Americans share that understanding of what's being an American?
I would say being American means that you really stand and abide by the Constitution. And what the original intent of the Constitution was, is that we, the people, receive our rights from God, and we have an obligation, having received our rights from God and not from a government, we have an obligation and a responsibility, which is what most people forget, that we have a responsibility to live up and be civil in a civil society. We have those obligations. So being an American means that we're living up to those things, that we aspire to those things, and that we have the right from God to pursue the ideals and dreams that we want to, without government interference, without a king telling us what to do, without a state government telling us what to do. And we have the freedom to apply and have economic value or property because of the fact that we get those rights from God. And throughout history, we've never had that ability. The average person did not. There was the aristocracy at the top who had all the land, who owned everything, or who owned slaves, and everybody else did not have that right. In America, we have the right to our own ideas. We have the right to innovate and create things and own those things. And the benefit that proceeds from them, the financial benefit. Like, we're one of the only countries that has a patent office. Why? Because we know that it's an injustice if you innovate and come up with an idea and create something out of you use your God-given ability to create something. No one else has a right to steal that from you. But it's part of our foundational document. It's in our Constitution that we have that. And so for me, that's what being an American is that we have the right to exercise our rights and freedoms without the constraints of government. And we use the responsibilities that we have that comes along with that, and grow and try to achieve a happy life as best we can.
Wow.
And I would say right now, you asked how many people, what percentage, I'd say it's probably 10 to 20% of the population that even understands that. A lot of them are really just living hedonistic lives where they're just seeking pleasure and avoiding as much pain as possible. And there's another portion, which throughout history, it's always been the majority. They don't want freedom. Freedom's scary. They want someone to take care of them.
There's a cost to freedom.
But there is absolutely a cost to freedom, and it's the responsibilities that most people want to neglect or reject. They want someone to, most of the Middle East, the other countries around the world, they want someone to control them. They want a strong man to protect them, but the strong man comes with strings where they tell you what to do. Any government that's big enough, to actually protect you is strong enough to take your rights away at the same time. So it's always a balance.
My second last question to you is, what do you feel the difference between the state and church? And what's the value of bringing them together and keeping them separate? And how, in a society which is civil, which believes in the state, which believes in the nation, which believes in the spirit of that nation, how does that play the role of state and church separate, together, or?
So that's an excellent question. I'm glad you didn't frame it as part of the Constitution, because it's really not. And that's one of the biggest confusions people have right now, is that separation of church and state is not in the Constitution. It's interpreted to be there, but the phrase didn't even exist until Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter to the Danbury Baptist Association nearly 50 years later, telling them that there's a wall of separation that protects the church from the state coming in and controlling it. Most of our states, the original states, they actually had state religions. So there was a Baptist state, there was an Anglican state. Each one of the states were kind of denominations, if you will. So the states have the rights to actually have their own religion or their own denomination. But the federal Constitution says that the federal government does not have those rights to do it. Now, as looking back at history and the purpose of why so many of the early immigrants came to this country is that they were seeking religious freedom. Whether it was, the Pilgrims, as we refer to them, whether it was the Quakers, no matter which denomination or group it was, they were all coming here for religious freedom. And if you look at our Declaration of Independence, we talk specifically about the fact that the king was enforcing and putting things on us that we did not want and did not agree to, but it was infringing upon our freedoms. So our freedom of worship is inherent in who we are as human beings from God. Now, we do not, as a Christian, my worldview is that we do not want a country or a nation that's controlled by a religious leader. I think out of all, I think Churchill said this, he said, democracy's the worst one out there, except for when you compare the worst government system until you compare it to every other, then it's the best. Mm-hmm. And that's really where we're at. Our founding fathers essentially established this country to be the least efficient in existence. Mm-hmm. Here's totalitarianism and here is anarchy. Mm-hmm. And our Constitution was about a millimeter away from anarchy, mm-hmm. because they wanted all of the rights to go to the states and the people. Mm-hmm. If you give people the rights that they're entitled to, there's going to be people that are always going to have a religious bent. And honestly, coming from a Christian worldview, and I know this may sound controversial, but in any time when you have the truth and you understand the truth, any other deviation from that is not an issue or a threat. Because if you know the truth, there's no lie that's going to convince you the truth isn't right. Mm-hmm. And our country is one of the few in the world that allows you to have any religious view that you want, because we know it's the person's responsibility, the individual's responsibility to work out their salvation or their relationship with God on their own. Oh. It's not the state's, at least not from our perspective.
Thank you. And my concluding question to you, if you can differentiate and define these two terms for me, statesperson and a politician.
Okay, so a statesperson and a politician, the big difference, a politician is generally out to seek control and power for themselves. A statesman or a statesperson is someone who actually is looking at the interests and sees themselves as a servant of their people, their nation, their country, their state, depending on what level that they are representing. But their interest is not what's best for me as a person. Their interest is what's best for the people that I am representing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, JJ.